Okay, it is 7:01, so I think we can go ahead. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. It's great to see you all here. Welcome to the first event of the winter term for 2021-22. We're in a new year now, which is exciting. I'm looking forward to saying goodbye to 2021. It was a tough year, I think, for all of us. So we're coming to you from Squatchy, Waskahagan, sometimes known as Edmonton, Alberta, which is in Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional homeland of the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Inuit, and many other indigenous people. In this area, sound and music has been heard and created and celebrated for thousands of years by many diverse nations and cultures. And tonight we're excited to humbly add our sounds and our sonic ideas to the history to the history of this place with respect and solidarity. If you haven't been to a Sound Studies event before, Sound Studies is an institute, a research institute at the University of Alberta. We're interested in sound in all ways of thinking about sound, including performative and artistic understandings of sound, and also human and other non-human understandings of sound in our world. We're really excited to have you here. As you may recall, if some of you who attended events last term, we talked a lot about being very excited about the idea of beginning the winter term with hybrid events, to be able to do these events in person again, but also continue with the online presence. We've been moving ahead with that plan, and we're ready to transition to that plan at this point whenever the COVID pandemic decides to subside enough for us to be able to do that safely. So there's been a lot of back and forth, obviously, and I know you all know that. But we do hope that we'll be able to bring you these events in a live setting before the end of the semester. We'll see what happens, but for the first couple of events this semester, we will be online as we have been. I do want to encourage you, if you haven't seen our lineup for the winter term, please visit our website, soundstudies.ca, and go to the events section, and you'll see in the lecture series page, we've posted information about the series for the term, so you can check that out. And we're really excited tonight to be welcoming Mehdi Rezania to give our first talk. And he's a really great musician and member of our community, santur player, composer, born in Abadeh, Iran. And is also a researcher and works in the area of ethnomusicology as a doctoral student here. He started music at the age of 13 and studied the advanced method of santur playing under Ardivan Kamkar in Tehran. And he co-founded Barbad Music in Toronto with Tolo Roshenas, and has performed numerous times with many local and international musicians, including Salar Aghili, Kevin Sackett, Hossein Berozinia, Symphonia Toronto. His music projects have been supported by grants from the Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council, the Edmonton Arts Council, and the Canada Foundation for the Arts. He's been a music advisor to Iranian Heritage Day at the Royal Ontario Museum, and artistic advisor to the Tirgan Festival in Toronto. As I mentioned, he's a student here. He's studied at York University and also here at University of Alberta, and is currently pursuing his PhD in ethnomusicology. And I'm really excited to hear his talk tonight, because he's going to be talking to us in this talk entitled Gems of Radif. He'll be exploring with us a new style of performing the Radif, which is a central repertoire of Persian and Iranian art music. A style of performing with the santur, which is an Iranian sort of hammered dulcimer-like instrument. I've heard him play a number of times I'm a fan, I would say. He's a wonderful performer and virtuoso, and I'm really excited that he's here. So I'll turn it over to him now.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Scott. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thanks for Sound Study Institute for having me. It's an honor to be here. I start by sharing my screen. You should be seeing my screen now.
Yes, we can see your first slide.
So what I'm going to talk about tonight mostly, it's about one music album that I released in 2020 with the help of support from Edmonton Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts. I had been working on it for about 5-6 years. It's also part of the my doctoral program. It's I would say it's the musical component of my doctoral program, because what I do in my doctoral program is I study Persian classical music, focusing on the past 40 years. But of course, it's related to I have to look at the history of it before that as well. And I hope to not look at the theoretical aspect of it, but also at how it changes through time based on the social and political regulations that change in society. So as you saw, the title is Gems of Radif, and I have to talk a little bit about Radif. My apologies if my talk is too little or too much. I always when I talk about the Persian classical music, it is difficult to address all the audience. I don't know what background they're coming from, so I'm giving you some information, and then I'll also introduce some books if you like to follow up with this subject. The Radif, which literally means row, it's a central repertoire of Persian classical music. It's a compilation of 12 grouping modes with about 300 melodic motifs in about 60 different modes, performed in an order. So the name Radif or row comes from the concept that these melodic motifs have to be performed in a certain order. There's some flexibility in changing the order, but not too much. Therefore comes the name Radif. Also, I have to mention that Radif is not only the only music repertoire of Iranian music. There are other repertoires, such as many other rhythmic pieces in 4 or 5 different forms. And there are also a great number of songs which stand independently from Radif. There are some overlaps with the formation of those other repertoires with Radif, but there are also aspects that categorize them as independent. So if to learn Persian music, one could start with any of them. We could start with learning the rhythmic pieces or songs or the Radif, but ultimately one has to reach a master level, one has to study all 3 of them. In the past, every master has to produce his own version of Radif, and that's by extemporization. There are vocal as well as instrumental versions of Radif. Some of the books that have been published, they have been, a number of them have been transcribed and have been recorded, such as the books that I'm showing on the screen. Every instrument has their own Radif as well, because the technical ability of instrument could produce a little different versions, which I elaborate later. So one aspect of learning Radif and producing it is becoming not just a performer, but performer composer, to learn it and then to produce it a little different from before. So what is Radif? As I mentioned, it's the compilation of 12 grouping modes that we call dastgāh. This system was compiled in the late 19th century. Before that, Iranian music was a little different. Was very similar to the maqam system, which is currently practiced in Turco-Arabic musical cultures. Radif has been inscribed in UNESCO in 2009 as a unique music making. The 12 grouping modes that we call dastgāh. Dastgāh literally means system. It could be also you can perceive dastgāh as a program as well, a number of pieces that are arranged in a particular way to produce a program. Right now, Iranian musicians like to differentiate these 12 dastgāh into 7 main dastgāh and 5 auxiliary dastgāh called avās. Every dastgāh could have between 15 to 30 melodic motifs called gusheh, which means corner. As I mentioned, dastgāh is similar to a suite or program. What happens in a performance of dastgāh is that the tonic ascends gradually from the 1st degree to the 8th degree with a stepwise motion or with a leap of a third, not more than a third. These pieces in the dastgāh are a combination of rhythmic and non-rhythmic melodies. They are all subject to extemporization, and the multiple modulations happened during a performance of one dastgāh. It could be like 2-3 modulations up to 7-8 modulations. And every dastgāh, it should be an interesting fact that every dastgāh, which has different mood, ends with a ring, which is a dance piece. So all the programs traditionally ended with the dance section. In the past, masters used to say that every of these dastgāh corresponds to a period of day. They should be played according to that time of the day. For example, they said Māhur is for morning, which is close to major scale in Western music. Bayat Turk is for noon, and Shur is for nights, and so on. So these melodic motifs that called gusheh have unique characteristics. One of the characteristics is shahid, literally means witness, which is a central tone. Shahid is different from the tonic in Western music because it's a tone that the melody revolves around it and not particularly just on that tone. It might like the piece might end not on the shahed, and might begin not with the shahed, which I elaborate later. Another characteristic is gens. This is the one of the concepts that I'm adding to the scholarship of Radif and Iranian music, and I will elaborate on this. So my argument is that the gens or type, gens is the word that some of the masters actually used in their terminology when they were teaching Radif to their students. Even the masters that didn't know notations or Western music, we have documents that they use these terms, gens, to describe the characteristic of a gusheh. And gens has a number of components. One is agház. Agház is the first tone or it's the first phrase. Another is east or stops that happen between the phrases. And another is the payan and final tone. So a gens could have these three characteristics, or could have one of them, not necessarily all of them. Another component of gens is mutaghayyir in some of the gushehs. It's a variable tone, so the mode it's not a modulation, but it's a variable. This concept of gens and like gusheh in general provides, it seems that it has a lot of characteristic that must be placed and presented, so there must be a very solid border around it, but actually it provides extensive flexibility for improvisation. And there is a fun fact that every of these 300 pieces have a unique name. The names could vary. They could be name of a place. They could be a name of a sensation. They could be a name of locations, and etc. So they're not like in Western music called by numbers, opus 1, 2, 3, etc. To elaborate on how the gens is produced in Persian music, I have to emphasize that the categorization in dastgāh is not just by the scale mode or intervals, but the melodic motif, the melodic characteristic of every gusheh. The melody plays a great role in this categorization. And I'm giving you 3 examples of 3 different modes. These 3 modes have the same scale as from F to A flat. They have the same shahed, which is C, and they have the same east, and as that little p means koron, which in Persian music, koron is less than a semitone. It's we call it a microtone flat. And the main tones of gens are only 4 pitches. The A koron, B flat, sorry, there is a mistake here, A flat, not A flat, A koron, B flat, C, and D. So three different dastgāhs have these similarities, but in Persian music, we differentiate them because the melodic motif is different. And I'm giving you example. So we establish the gens, we establish the characteristic within 10 to 15 seconds. The first example is from the mode Abu Ata. The second is the gens of Afshari. third is Navā. Another concept that so this is a macro perspective of the Radif, looking at the Radif as a big picture, is the concept that I've found in other forms of art in Iranian culture, and it's what I call it simple and profound, an extreme attention to the details. This has been said in scholar Gerson Kivi says, one finds the most expressive melodies usually restricted to a mere 3 tones, which are confined with the ambis of a third. Usually the small 3 or 4 tone melodies are drawn out for half an hour, and one is amazed to find out how much has happened in a single minute. It manifests a self-imposed demand on the human imagination to let a motif rotate in never-ending spirals without ever repeating it nor exceeding the dastgāh limits. The same concept, you could see it in Iranian miniatures. This is a sample by Mahmoud Farshian. The Iranian miniatures are not very big. Usually the frame is about like 60 by 40 centimeters or even smaller. But if you focus, if you zoom out, you'll see extensive attention to the details. As you see, multiple colors and multiple shades of blue or green has been used within a small frame. Also, I want you to pay attention to the curves in this visual arts, because I refer that curve as a cyclic motion in the Radif later as well. In the Iranian calligraphy, you see the same great attention to the details, to the curves. This piece is by Ghulam Hossein Amirkhani, one of the most celebrated calligrapher in Iran. And to the architectures, an example is the Shah Mosque in Isfahan, built in 17th century. Again, extensive attention to the details. It's a larger structure, but still, if you zoom out, you see details within every small frames. This is the dome of the same mosque in Isfahan. Another example is Persian carpets. You see the same symmetry, a lot of curves. And the last one is Persian carpet, 17th century, and I particularly show that because it's now the most expensive Persian carpet. Was sold $33 million in 2013. Again, the same thing is in Persian poetry. The form of quatrains, which is the form that especially Khayyam used, and Khayyam is famous in Western culture because of the translations of Fitzgerald. He condenses large meanings into 4 small lines. Also, in this formats, it's been argued that Khayyam pays attention to a cyclic form. For example, in this particular example, the first line is about the world, a big picture. Then he goes to talks about the Jayhun, a river, as a river that flows, that shows the humans' tears, and then he goes to the beyond this world, and he talks about the hell and heaven. So he look at this world and the one beyond it and combines all these meanings in 4 small lines. Another concept that I've been adding to the scholarship of Radif is the retention and pretension has been used by Husserl and has been explained by Merleau-Ponty, who says, through the double horizon of retention and pretension, my present may cease to be a factual present, quickly carried away and abolished by the flow of duration and become a fixed and identifiable point in objective time. He continues, I do not pass through a series of instances of now, the images of which I preserve and which, placed end to end, make a line. With the arrival of every moment, its predecessor undergoes a change. I still have it in hand and it is still there, but already it is sinking away below the level of presence. In order to retain it, I need to reach through a thin layer of time. It's a new concept that I'm working on to argue that there is an authentic performance of Radif, or authentic performance of a dastgāh, not the old Radif. It has the quality of meditation as well as the graphication, and it becomes a journey that takes a listener to alter the temporalities. How it does this how this manifests is through a number of components. One is a cadence. Cadences happen at the end of a single gusheh. So there is a return every piece when the shahed or imagine tonic goes stepwise or with a leap of third. At the end of the gusheh, there is a cadence that comes back to the first shahed that produces a retention, and the final shahed is the first one. So again, you see a lot of cyclic motions, but these cyclic motions also produce a pretension because it's the gradual ascending creates a sense of anticipation, and also the quality of the dastgāh, which is a combination of rhythmic and a non-rhythmic. I argue that most of the rhythmic sections produce some sort of graphications, and non-rhythmic sections produce a sense of meditation. So simultaneous release of musical energies happen, and tension and anticipation of the recreation, anticipation of recreation of more. But all this journey finishes with a ring, which is a celebration of life. So every dastgāh could have a different mood. It could be tense, it could be sad, it could be very happy, it could be bright, but all of them at the end finish with a dance piece, which I argue is a retemporalization. So how do you learn the Radif? The students begin by memorizing at least one instrumental Radif and at least one vocal Radif. Then they start listening to multiple performances, because to learn the characteristics is not enough to just memorize one version or two versions. And then they start to extemporize on the gushehs. And then listening further, learning more versions, comparison and practice. So at least it takes a decade to come to a decent decent level of understanding and performing the Radif. If you'd like to read more about the Radif, I'd like to suggest this book, The Dastgāh Concept in Persian Music by Hormuz Farhat, who actually died recently. He wrote the first PhD thesis about Persian music in 1966, which was published in 1990. So why this project? Why I started with this project? Most of my compositions are more outside the Radif system, but I particularly wanted to do this project as I noticed that Radif, as one of the unique Iranian cultural heritage, it's seldom performed in diaspora in its original, not in original version, but it's the original style of performing it. Also, I've noticed that in academia, there's been less attention to studying the theoretical and philosophical aspects of the Radif, and there is more attention to study the cultural, political, and social aspects of Iranian music. And also for the, of course, for the personal development in music creation for myself. So in this album, I've introduced new elements, except the third one, which has been multiple times used by others. The other elements have rarely been exercised. One is the tuning system of santur, which I've changed it. I've modified the silence between phrases much more than has been exercised. Different selection of gusheh, which a number of other performers use, but I explained that how is my own understanding of this element. I've employed 3 registers of santur. As you see in the picture, santur is a hammered dulcimer. The Iranian version has 3 registers. From right to left goes from the low to the high pitch, and from the bottom to the top. It has about 3 octaves plus half, so 3.5 octaves. I've used the prolongation of various tones with tremolos, which I showed the example for this. I've also have the minimalist approach to some gusheh. And for every of these, I'm going to show you an example. I've used a modification in melody by changing the accents and dynamics, which it's been used before, but my own version is a little different. And I've used unorthodox variations in some of the gusheh. So when I was talking about the details and the borders in Persian culture in general, and particularly in Radif, I meant to say that when I change some new elements, when I modify the performance of Radif, I am acknowledging that I'm playing within a border, and my attempt has been not to break these borders, but to stretch them a little bit. And I hope that I've been hopeful, successful, but it's up to the audience to decide. So starting from the tuning system of santur, for example, in the dastgāh Māhur, which one of the 2 programs in the album, the other santur players have been using different tuning system. I've named them. These are the canonic santur players who have established the repertoire of santur in the past 100 years. فرامرز پایور، مجید کیانی، پرویز مشکاتیان, and پشنگ کامکار. دستگاه ماهور has some particular gusheh, which have modulation. So the main dastgāh is close to the major scale. Imagine the F major scale. But with the, for example, the gusheh of dulcimer, we need the D coron showed in the with the blue arrow, and because santur is a diatonic instrument, it's a fixed pitch. So if on a register you have D natural, you cannot have D coron or D flat. So you have to use another register for it. So for example, Majid Kiani likes to tune the instrument when he can perform the dulcimer in the middle of the instrument. But if you look at the Parviz Meshkatian, he uses the D coron on the higher register. And if you look at the Pashang Kamkar, he doesn't have the D coron. So in his performances, he hasn't used this particular gusheh. And another example is the gusheh shekaste. If you look at the shekaste, uses the A coron with the red arrows. The first three musicians use it. The fourth one, Pashang Kamkar, doesn't use it, and etc. Gusheh, Araq, and Rock. For me, I have not used those three gushehs, and as you see, I've tuned the instrument so that I could use the remaining three gushehs, which don't use these modulations, but I've used those remaining gushehs in three registers. Also, I have another addition, which is a F sharp with the green arrow, which allows me to modulate from Māhur to Esfahan in G. Esfahan is similar to minor harmonic. So if you look at the, for example, to the tuning system of the Pashang Kamkar, you see that in a higher register with A flat, you can produce a section of from the E natural all the way to C. You can produce F minor, but my tuning system doesn't allow it. So I've used another trick. I've used the G sharp, and then in the middle of santur, I can use G minor, which is equal to the Esfahan. For the program, as I mentioned, my selection of the gusheh is a little different from traditional selection. In most of the traditional performance of dastgāh and Māhur, the right column has been used. I've used my selection is the left. The gushehs with the blue color have not been played much as the right column. So this different selection produces a different program. I've used particular techniques of santur because I look at the santur, like I look at the instrument as a theory. And Radif was, when it was compiled in the middle of 19th century, it was compiled by the performers of tar, which is an Iranian lute with frets. But santur provides new technical abilities. So when a music system is established within the abilities of one instrument, it is possible to give some modification to that system by using another instruments. That has been my understanding. It's not just, and I'm not the first to do it. The previous names that I mentioned, they have contributed hugely to perform Radif on santur. Before me, I'm just adding to their creations a little bit. And I hope that this lead to a new understanding of the concept of Radif performed with my instrument santur. I give you some examples of why santur could be different from the tar. For examples, the double tones that you see in this score by Faramarz Payvar, they're not able to be performed on tar. Another example is high pitches, the D above, pointed with the yellow arrow. That register, that high register doesn't exist with the tar. If you look at the red arrows, you see a tremolos that's between it's a 9-degree intervals. It creates a sound that we call khash. It's close to a distortion sound. That sound cannot be produced by tar, but has been used by Faramarz Payvar. Another technique is rapid playing of left and right across registers in the section that I've shown. It creates a sort of a collage, which cannot be performed with the tar. Now I'm going to give you some examples of my performance of the Radif compared to the traditional Radif that has been performed by Dariush Tala'I. Dariush Tala'I is a grandmaster of Persian classical music, and the UNESCO version of the Radif that has been recorded is by this musician, and he played it with the setar, which is like a smaller version of tar. So I'll play the Banafshe in dastgāh Māhur by Dariush Tala'I. As you notice, the gushehs are relatively small, could be between, most of them are between 1 to 2 minutes. And this is my performance of the same gusheh. If you noticed, I paid a special attention to silence because of prolongation of silence between phrases. I think it would induce to stay and ponder a sense of like haiku or rubai in Persian poetry, and to highlight the gems, to highlight the, by gems I mean those beautiful phrases between because I think the traditional performance of Radif is a rapid movement through the beautiful sentences and phrases. So I like to stop a little bit more between these phrases. Also, if you notice, I used a very little of tremolo, giving a kind of a minimalist understanding of or representation of this gusheh. And repetition, if you notice, I played it across 2 registers to create a review, to rethink about those gems or those phrases. I talked about the minimalism because of, I think to keep the time, I give you another example of how I've done this aspect of prolongation of a gusheh to different gusheh. So traditionally, one gusheh has one characteristic and it stays within the borders of certain tones. What I've done in this example is that I played one gusheh as it was, like I produced the characteristic and gens of the gusheh, which is now called naghmeh. Then I extended that melodic movement to a higher section, which is called nahuft. So by playing the naghmeh on nahuft, I think it creates a double understanding. You hear the navā with 2 characteristics entwined. So this is the traditional version of the piece Naghmeh by Dariush Tala'I. And my version. I'll show you another aspect. I think I have some time to show this example as well. To alter a melody by modification of dynamics. Hazin is the name of a gusheh, which literally means grief, and it has a sense of a grief, as you would listen to it. I've highlighted the sense of grief with muffling the main melody, with silences between the phrases, also by extending the dynamic contrast. And that's done with the double notes of the intervals third and fourth in the high tones that I show you here. The red arrows indicate those pitches that in the traditional version, it's a passing tone. But in my own performance of it, I highlight these tones and try to produce it differently to highlight the grief sense of this melodic motif. So listen to the Tala'I's version. On my version. There are other examples, there are other changes that I've done, including modification of rhythmic pieces that used to be a habit of musicians in the past, but I think influenced by the Western concept of pieces that like fixed pieces has to be fixed rhythmic pieces has to be played exactly like they were written or they were played before. Recent musicians have not exercised that much, but I've done an example in this album. The piece that is called "A Dance of a Persian Music" was actually a piece by Ali Akbar Shahnazi, which it's about 1 minute and 30 seconds. Then a contemporary santur player and master santur player, Siamak Aghai, has modified that piece and played it in another mode called the Char Mizrab Navā, which is about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I extended that piece to about 5 minutes in this album. So benefits of learning Radif for other musicians or other music makers, or even one dastgāh, is a unique way of sound making, learning rhythmic and non-rhythmic patterns entwined, how to combine them, and learning how Iranians use various intervals beyond semitones and quarter tones, and also learning new ideas in designing a music program, because every dastgāh, I argue that is like it's exactly a music program. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. That was really great. And just because you're shy, I also want to just mention that the recording that this talk is about, the CD project or the LP, it's available on Spotify and Amazon. At least I know that much. It's probably available elsewhere as well. So hopefully you can all check that out at some point. It's beautiful stuff. Okay, so let's see, we're at 8 o'clock, but I think we can, so for those who have to go right at 8, thank you so much for coming, and we hope that we'll see you again in a couple weeks. But I would like to take an opportunity to open up for questions. We can go over a few minutes. So if anyone has any questions about this music or about the particular, either his particular music or about this music in general, or anything about the presentation, I invite you to raise your hand, either your virtual hand, I suppose, and also I believe that you'll be able to unmute yourself if you'd like to just ask your question as well. So. Okay, so I will start because I have some questions, but I hope others will speak up too. So yeah, Mehdi, I'm really interested in some ways I think you implied this. I'm not quite sure, but that your sort of continuing innovation, I suppose, on the Radif and on a lot of these traditional kinds of classical music pieces. Would you say that your sort of further innovations are somewhat progressive, or considered to be somewhat progressive, and just as a way of one thing I did notice that in all of your examples, and I think you even mentioned this in the first one, but you seem to be very free in your use of changing registrations in all of those examples, and that's something that I didn't hear in the others. And I wondered if, for example, for that particular innovation, if that is considered to be something that other folks have done too in other ways, or is that more unique to what you're doing? And I'm just generally curious about what your innovations connect with the larger sort of tradition.
Thanks very much, Scott. Great question. I don't think it's my work is progressive. I've tried to stay within the limits. Also, I could say that, like, to some extent, these innovations have been used by other musicians. For example, santur players have come with new tuning system for their performances of Radif or their pieces, but not in this particular way. So I'm just adding up to what they've showed, and I'm compiling a number of them into one. So one musician used a different tuning system, another musician used different sort of variations, but again, not like one aspect that has not been exercised much, and I think it's very easy and it's very possible to add a different color to this performance is the use of silence, and special attention to the instrument, like how santur could produce a sound, like the tremolos across the registers when a phrase is done, and then you continue with the tremolo. It's easy, and it's I think it gives a new understanding of that phrase, or the minimalist idea was there are master musicians in Iranian music who have used silence, such as Jalil Shahnaz, but recently, like especially in the past 40 years, there's been a great tendency to use virtuosic movements, passages, complicated techniques in producing the radif. And so I'm bridging to another period, not just period, to particular styles that used a simpler way of producing this sound. So none of these, like the tuning system I haven't seen it before, but it's not, I'm not the first one who has used a new tuning system for santur. People have used it. I'm just adding to their vocabulary in this sort of
Yeah, that's really interesting. What you were saying about the silences too, because I think, I hear the silences not so much as silences, but as moments where the attack portion of the instrument is paused and lets us hear the ringing, the resonance of the instrument. And that's really beautiful. I wonder if that sort of implies a certain way of miking the instrument when you play it live. Do you find that you want to sort of be able to kind of get inside the instrument even more when you're performing in that way?
With miking, of course, there are more options in producing the sound, right? We can add vibrae, we can add different things. But since this music was established in courts and the houses of elites, so it was played and established in a small venues, and I think it matters, like the space that a music system, a music culture is established, gives certain options and reduces other options to producing the sounds. And that concept was, I was informed, like I was acknowledging that concept, and I thought about the not changing the like I when I was recording, I explained to the soundman that I wanted to be recorded as it is live, without any addition of the qualities that sound engineering could add or reduce it to some extent that is possible. And at the end, you want the contemporary audience to be able to like relate to it, but also preserve the authenticity that you think was essential in producing the core of this music culture. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Thank you. I do have one other question, but I won't ask it until I check to see if others have questions first.
I have a quick one, I think. And Mehdi, maybe you actually touched on this and I just missed it. But so you mentioned the silences a couple times, and then when you were playing the different examples with the sort of original one and then your version, the older ones were, I'll say, much, for me, kind of busier in the rhythms. And then you have these silences, like you're talking about, the longer parts. I was wondering if there's, and you mostly were talking about pitch throughout, and modes and scales. I was wondering if there's sets of rhythms that you would typically use, and if you're purposely diverging from those as well, and sort of how that works, basically.
Thanks, Tom. Great question. Actually, in reproducing this the radif, there are great flexibilities that you can insert your own ideas or manipulate them. For example, if you notice some of the gushehs, like now I played it in a very specific, like 2/4 meter. But if you when we listen to the original, it's not exactly rhythmic, but it's not rhythmic. So we have pieces that are exclusively non-rhythmic, and pieces are exclusively rhythmic, and there are pieces between. So it gives you the option that do you want to stay like that, or you want to go towards the non-rhythmic pattern, or toward the more rhythmic pattern, or even another combination. So you can come up with your own combination as well. And I intently changed some of these dynamics. If it was non-rhythmic, I gave it rhythmic, and I even prolonged that to show that it is possible to produce it in this way. Or if it was more rhythmic, I gave more silences between the phrases to create a break between the patterns. And then, well, the listener who's accustomed to listen to that, to those pulses to happen, when the pulses stop to happen, it gives the listener another understanding. It stops in the time, or it creates retention, pretension, as I was discussed, in a different way. That was my intention, at least.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, Mehdi, my other question is about notation. So because I'm curious about that. I noticed, for example, I think you called it the Quran, the alteration that's a quarter flat rather than a full flat. Yeah.
Oh,
so
yes.
I noted in the sort of adapted Western notational system you're using to portray all the melodic aspects of things to us, that special symbol. I think that diamond shaped symbol, I'm assuming, is the symbol for that alteration. Yes. And so one of the things you said in the beginning of the talk was how the Radif is not necessarily widely practiced outside of the homeland, and that it sounds to me like your interest in addition to innovating this traditional style of music is also to promote it and to encourage people to experiment with it and to learn it. And so I'm just curious, in the 21st century, what is the primary mode, or I mean, I don't know that there's one that works with every culture either, but is it typical to use the adapted Western notational system to teach people this music, or is it more, and I know you mentioned earlier that traditionally people would attend performances by different folks and then obviously probably learn by rote. But in the 21st century, I'm just curious, what are the techniques for teaching and learning this music, and does notation play a strong role in that?
Great question, Scott. Yes, actually, the first Iranian notation, the first Iranian notation book for teaching an instrument was actually published 100 years ago. I think 1922, exactly 100 years ago. And then in that book, the author Ali Naqi Waziri, who had studied Western music, he introduced two new signs, like for half flat and half sharp, which is not exactly half, but he explained it. And since then, there's been development on notation, and I believe that it is very possible to notate the Persian music exactly, but with the, of course, same as master classes in Western music. If there's a teacher who explains them exactly, that's how to. Because there are a lot of dynamics changes, and if you write every single pitch with dynamics, it's a confusion that could change. But it is good to use the notation. I learned it by notation first too. It's been like in the past 40 years, most of the masters, including the University of Tehran and the music schools, private, they all use Western notation to teach Persian music, and I showed some examples of the Radif that has been notated. My point about I didn't give. My point was not to give like innovation per se to Radif. I wanted to, because the general concept in Iranians abroad the country is that the traditional Radif is kind of boring because they like to listen to more rhythmic pieces. They like to listen to songs there is a vocalist, or the rhythmic pieces with multiple instruments, with percussions back and forth. So if you go to a typical Persian music concert, even by masters, you see a great portion of the program is rhythmic. So my aim was represent, but to show that it is maybe possible to still listen to Radif and enjoy a 20-minute program without having too many rhythmic pieces. And if you look at it as a fluctuation of rhythmic and non-rhythmic, that could be a sense of innovation within itself. It doesn't have to be a piece in 2/4 and then a piece in 3/4 and then another piece faster or slower. But within the change of these dynamics, you could find these interesting changes of ideas back and forth. The same way that we look at a miniature. It's when we look at the miniature I showed, if someone wants to describe it, it's a one woman within a beautiful like background. But when we look closer and we look longer, we see many different colors. We see that like the legs of the female was entwined with the earth. It could be an interesting idea to think about. So it doesn't have to be a multiple people on a frame. It could be just one, but the interesting aspect of it could be within the details that we pay attention. So I wanted to bring back that notion of listening to Radif, because in the elite houses and the courts, people used to listen to performance of Radif for hours. Like we have documents that they said that people were sitting and listening to this, and they were like gatherings that listened to this for hours, and now it has changed to some degree.
Wow. Well, I certainly could listen to it for hours. It's beautiful music.
Thank you.
Well, I thank you so much for this presentation, and I hope everyone gets a chance to listen to the recording and more, and we'll also hope for more. So that this is really great. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming tonight, and I want to thank our crew, Gail Mandrick and Tom Merklinger, Oliver Rossier. And just to remind everyone that our next event will be on Wednesday, January the 26th. We'll be having a really interesting presentation by Shiasta Meghani, who is going to be talking about soundscape interventions, or using soundscapes to help reduce stress, anxiety, and pain in post-ICU survivors. And I want to say that I'm really excited that she agreed to give this talk, because this research is just in the very beginning stages, and it's really exciting work. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Oh yeah, and just maybe right at the last moment, as Tom is saying, we do have one more quick question from Masato, which is, how do you respond to the reaction of conservatives to the kind of omission of gushehs in like dulcimer and shakaste? That's a very insider question, but that might be a nice one to close things out.
Okay, yeah, well, I give a quick answer. If you listen to every performance of the dastgāh by great masters, you see that there has been different selections. Like I'm just adding to the vocabulary again. Like the musician that I showed, Faramarz Payvar on santur, his recording of Māhur does not have the performance of Dilkash that you mentioned. So I said, okay, well, he doesn't have Dilkash. And then I listened to Pashang Kamkar. He skipped the Shikaste as well. So I skipped both of them, and I also skipped other things, but I added the other stuff that they have not played it. So I think within this selection, it's it's not distorting the culture, because the idea is creation, and the idea is being a performer, creator, and within that creation lies certain selections.
Okay, well, thank you again. And if you would like, you can unmute yourself and turn your cameras on and give Mehdi a warm
Thanks very much. Thank you, Scott,
Zoom
for having me.
applause.
Sound Studies Institute. Thanks very much for everyone.